Chapter 3: The Recognition. From this intense consciousness of being the object observer and universal observation, the world of the Scarlet Letter was a land relieved by discerning. On the outskirts of the crowd a figure which irresistibly took possession of her thoughts. An Indian in his native garb was standing there, but the red men were no so unfrequent visitors of the English settlement, that one of them would have attracted any notice from Hester Prynne. At such a time, much less would he have excluded all other objects and ideas from her mind. By the Indian's side, and evenly sustaining a companionship with him, stood a white man, clad in a strange disarray of civilized and savage costume. He was small in stature, with a furrowed visage, which, as yet, could hardly be termed aged. There was a remarkable intelligence in his features, as of a person who had so cultivated his mental power that it could not fail to mould the physical to itself, and became manifest by unmistakable tokens, although by a seemingly careless arrangement of his heterogeneous garb he had endeavoured to conceal or evade the peculiarity. It was sufficiently evident to Hester Prynne that one of these man's shoulders rose higher than the other. Again, at the first instant of perceiving that dim visage, and the slight deforming of the figure, she pressed her infant to her bosom with so compulsive a force that the poor babe uttered another cry of pain, but the mother didn't seem to hear it. At his arrival in the market-place, and some time before she saw him, the stranger had bent his eyes on Hester Prynne. It was scarcely at first like a man chiefly accustomed to look inward, and to wound external matters out of a little value of any import, unless they bear relation to something within his mind. Very soon, however, his look became keen and penetrative, and growing horror twisted itself across his features, like a snake gliding swiftly over them, and making one little pause, with all these crescent involutions in open sight. His face darkened with some powerful emotion, which, nevertheless, he so instantaneously controlled by an effort of his will, that, save at a single moment, its expression might have passed for calmness. After a brief space, the convulsion grew almost imperceptible, and finally subsided into the depths in his nature, when he found the eyes of Esther Prynne fastening his own, and saw that she appeared to recognize him. He slowly and calmly raised his finger, made a gesture with it in the air, and laid it on his lips. Then, touching the shoulder of a townsman who stood next to him, he addressed him in a formal and courteous manner. "I pray you, good sir," said he, "who is this woman, and wherefore is she here set up to public shame?" "You must need to be a stranger in this region, friend," answered the townsman, looking curiously at the questioner and his savage companion, "else you would surely have heard of Mistress Hester Prynne, and her evil doings. She has raised a great scandal, I promise you, and Goodly Master denies the charge." "You say truly," replied the other. "I am a stranger, and I have been a wanderer, sorely against my will. I have met with grievous mishap by sea and land, and have been long held in bonds among the Hurrian folk to the southward, and am now brought hither by this Indian, to be redeemed out of my captivity. Will it please you, therefore, to tell me of Hester Prynne? Have I heard rightly of this woman's offences, and what has brought her to yonder scaffold?" "Truly, friend, and methinks it must gladden your heart, after your troubles and sojourn in the wilderness," said the townsman. to find yourself aligned in a land where inquiry is shouted and punished in the sight of rulers and people, as here in our goodly New England. Yonder woman, sir, you must know, was the wife of a certain learned man, English by birth, but who had long dwelt in Amsterdam, whence, some good time ago, he was meaning to cross over and cast in his lot with us of the Massachusetts. To this purpose he sent his wife before him, remaining himself to look after some necessary affairs. Mary, good sir, in some 2 years or less that the woman has been a dealer here in Boston, nothing has come near this learning gentleman her Master Prime, and his young wife, look you, being left to her own misguidance. Ah, aha, I convince you, said the stranger, with a brilliant smile. The learned man as you speak of should have learned this too in his books, and who, by your favour, sir, may be the father of the yonder babe. It is some 3 or 4 months old, I should judge, which Mr. Prince is holding in her arms. Of a true friend, that matter remained a riddle, and the Daniel who shall spoil is yet a wanting, answered the townsman. Madam Hester absolutely refused to speak, and the magistrates have laid their heads together in vain. Peradventure the guilty one was then looking on at this sad spectacle, undone of man, and forgetting that God sees him. The learned man, observed the stranger with another smile, should calm himself to look into the mystery. "It behoves him well, if he be still alive," responded the townsman. "Now, good sir, our Massachusetts magistracy, bethinking themselves that this woman is youthful and fair, and doubtless was strongly tempted to her fault, and that, moreover, as is most likely, her husband may be at the bottom of the sea, they have not been bold to pour forth the extremity of our righteous law against her. The penalty thereof is death. But, in their great mercy and tenderness of heart, they have doomed Mistress Prime to stand only a space of 3 hours on the platform of the pillory, and then and thereafter, for the remainder of her natural life, to wear a mark of the chain upon her bosom. "I was sentenced," remarked the stranger, gravely bowing his head. Thus she will be a living sermon against him, until the ignominious letter be engraved upon her tombstone. It irks me, nevertheless, that the partner of her inquiry shall not, at least, stand on the scaffold by her side. But he will be known, he will be known, he will be known. He bowed courteously to the communicative townsman, and whispering a few words to his Indian attendant, they both made their way through the crowd. While this passed, Hester Prynne had been standing on her pedestal, still with a fixed gaze toward the stranger, so fixed a gaze that at moments of intensest absorption all other objects in the visible world seemed to vanish, leaving only him and her. Such an interview, perhaps, would have been more terrible than even to meet him as she now did, with the hot, midday and sun burning down upon her face, and lighting up its shame, with the scarlet token of infamy on her breast, with the sin-burning fan in her hand, with a whole people round for us to a festival, staring at the features that should have been seen only in the quiet gleaming of the fireside, in the happy shadow of a home, or beneath a manfully veiled church. Dreadful as it was, she was conscious of a shelter in the presence of these thousand witnesses. It was better to stand thus, with so many betwixt him and her, than to greet him face to face, they two alone. She fled for refuge, as it were, to the public exposure, and dreaded the moment when its protection should be withdrawn from her. Involved in this thought, she scarcely heard a voice behind her, until it had repeated her name more than once, in a loud and sounding tone, audible to the whole multitude. "Hearken unto me, Hester Prynne," said the voice. It has already been noticed that directly over the platform on which Hester Prynne stood was a kind of balcony or open gallery appended to a mirroring house. It was the place whence proclamations were wont to be made, amid an assemblage of the magistracy, with all the ceremonial that attended such a public observance in those days. Here, to witness the scene which we are describing, sat Governor Bellingham himself, with four sergeants about his chair, bearing halberds as a guard of honour. He wore a dark feather in his hat, a border of embroidery on his clothes, and a black velvet tunic banded. A gentleman advanced in years, and with a hard experience writing in his wrinkles. He was not able felt to be the head and representative of a community, which owned its origin and progress, and its present state of development, not to the impulses of youth, but to the stern and tempered energies of manhood and the some sagacity of age, accomplishing so much, possibly because it imagined and hoped so little. The other eminent characters by whom the chief ruler was surrounded were distinguished by a generation of men belonging to a period when the forms of authority were felt to possess the sacredness of divine institutions. They were, doubtless, good men, just and sage, but out of the world of human family it would not have been easy to select the same number of wise and virtuous persons, who should be less capable of sitting the judgment on an erring woman's heart, and disentangling its mesh of good and evil, than the sages of rigid aspect towards one Hester Prynne not turning her face. She seemed conscious, indeed, that whatever sympathy she might expect lay in the large and harmony heart of the multitude, for, as she lifted her eyes toward the balcony, the unhappy woman grew pale and trembled. The voice which had called her attention was that of the Reverend and famous John Wilson, the eldest clergyman of Boston, a great scholar, like most of his contemporaries in the profession, and withal a man of kind and genial spirit. This last attribute, however, has been less carefully developed than his intellectual gifts, and was, in truth, rather a matter of shame than self-congratulation with him. There he stood, with a burden of grizzled locks beneath his skull cap, while his grey eyes, accustomed to the shaded light of his study, were winking like those of a startled infant in the adulterated sunshine. He looked like the darkly aggressive portrait which we see prefixed to all volumes of sermons, and had no more right than one of those portraits would have to step forth, as he now did, and met with the question of human guilty, patience, and ages. "Mr. Brand," said the clergyman, "I have striven with my young brother here, under whose preaching of the word you have been privileged to sit." Here Mr. Wilson laid his hand on the shoulder of a pale young man beside him. "I have sought, I say, to persuade this godly youth that he should deal with you, here in the face of heaven, and before these wise and upright rulers, and inheriting of all the people, as touching the violence and blackness of your sin, knowing your natural temper better than I. He could the better judge what arguments to use, whether of tenderness or terror, such as might prevail over your hardness and obstinacy, and so much that you should no longer hide the name of him who tempted you to this grievous fault. But he opposes to me, with a judgment over softness, albeit wise beyond his years, that it were growing the very nature of woman to force her to lay open her heart's secret, is so grow daily, and in presence of so great a multitude. Truly, as sought to convince him, the shame lay in the commission of the sin, and not in the showing of it forth. What say you to it? Once again, brother Dinsdale? Must it be taught, or I thou shalt deal with this poor sinner's soul? There was a murmur among the dignified reverend occupants of the balcony, and Governor Bellingham gave expression to its purport, speaking in an authoritative voice, although tempered with respect towards the young full-carman whom he addressed. "Good Master Dinsdale," said he, "the responsibility of this woman's soul lies really with you. It behoves you, therefore, to exhort her to repentance and to confession, as a proof and consequence thereof." The directness of this appeal drew the eyes of the whole crowd upon the Reverend Mr. Ginsley, a young clergyman, who had come from one of the great English universities, bringing all the learning of the age into our wild forest land. His eloquence and religious fervour had already given the earnest of high eminence in his profession. He was a person of very striking aspect, with a wide, lofty, and unpainted brow, large brown melancholy eyes, and mouth which, unless when he forcibly compressed, was apt to be tremulous, expressing bad nervous sensibility and a vast power of self-restraint. Notwithstanding his high native gifts and scholar-like attainments, there was an air about this young minister, an apprehensive, a startled, a half-frightened look, as of a being who felt himself quite straight and lost in the pathway of human existence, and could only be at ease in some execution of his own. Therefore, so far as his duties would permit, he trod the shadowy bypaths, and thus kept himself simple and childlike, coming forth, when occasion was, with a freshness and fragrance and purity of thought, which, as many people said, affected them like the speech of an angel. Such was the young man whom the Reverend Mr. Wilson and the Governor had introduced so openly to the public notice, bearing him speak, in the hearing of all men, to that mystery of a woman's soul, too sacred even in this pollution. The trying nature of his position drove the blood from his cheek, and made his lip tremulous. "Speak to the woman, my brother," said Mr. Wilson. "It is of moment to her soul, and therefore, as the worshipful Governor says, momentous to thine own, it will charge her is, exhort her to confess the truth." The Reverend Mr. Dinsdale bent his head in silent prayer, as it seemed, and then came forward. "Hester Prynne," said he, leaning over the balcony, and looking down steadfastly into her eyes, "tell her the hearest what this good man says, and seest the uncontroversity under which I labour. If thou feelest it to be for thy soul's peace, and that the early punishment will thereby be made more effectual to salvation, I charge thee to speak out the name of thy fellow sinner and fellow sufferer. Be not silent from any mistaken pity and tenderness from him. For, believe me, Hester, though he were to step down from a high place, and stand there beside thee, on thy pedestal of shame, yet very well is so, that to have a guilty heart thou life, what can thy silence do for him, except to damn him? Yea, confess him, as it were, to add hypocrisy to sin? Heaven hath granted thee an opening minority, that thereby thou mayest work out an open trimming over the evil within thee, and the sorrow without. Take heed how thou dealest to him. who perchance had not the courage to grasp it for himself. The bitter but wholesome cup that is now present to the lips. The young pastor's voice was tremendly sweet, rich, deep, and broken. The feeling that is so easily manifested rather than the direct purport of the words caused it to vibrate within all hearts, and brought the listeners into one accord of sympathy. Even the poor baby at Hester's bosom was affected by the same influence, for it it hit her to become gaze towards Mr. Dinsmore, and held up its little arms with a half-blessed, half-plaintive murmur, so powerful seeming the minister appeal, that the people could not believe the, but that Hester Prynne will speak out the guilty names, or else that the guilty one himself, in whatever high or lowly place he stood, will be drawn forth by an inward and inevitable necessity, and compelled to ascend the scaffold. Hester shook her head. "Woman, transgress not beyond the limits of Heaven's mercy," cried the Reverend Mr. Wilson, more harshly than before. That little babe had been gifted with a voice, to second and confirm the counsel which thou hadst heard. Speak out the name, that, in the repentance, may able to take the scarlet letter of the breast. "Never," replied Mr. Prime, looking, not at Mr. Wilson, but into the deep and troubled eyes of the younger clergyman. "It's too deeply branded. Ye cannot take it off. It would that I mayn't endure his agony as well as mine." "Speak, woman," said another voice, coldly and sternly, proceeding from the crowd about the scaffold. "Speak, and give your child a father." "I will not speak," answered Hester, turning pale as death, but responding to this voice, which he too thoroughly recognised. "And my child must seek an heavenly Father. She shall never know an earthly one." "She will not speak," murmured Mr. Dinsmore, who, leaning over the balcony, with his hand upon his heart, had awaited the result of his appeal. He now drew back with a long respiration. One rules strength and generosity of a woman's heart. She will not speak. Discerning the impracticable state of the poor culprit's mind, the elder clergyman, who had carefully prepared himself for the occasion, addressed to the multitude a discourse on sin in all its branches, but with continual reference to the diminished level. So forcibly did he dwell upon this symbol, for the hour or more during which his periods were rolling over the people's heads, that it assumed new terrors in their imagination, and seemed to derive its scarlet hue from the flames of the infernal pit. Josephine, meanwhile, kept her place upon the pedestal of shame, with glasses eyes, and an air of weary indifference. She had borne that morning all that nature could endure, and, as her temperament was not of the order that escapes from too intense suffering by a storm, her spirit could only shelter itself beneath a stony cross of insincerity, while the faculties of animal life remained entire. In this state, the voice of the preacher thundered remonstratingly, but unavailingly, upon her ears. The infant, during the latter portion of her ordeal, pierced the air with its wailing and screams. She strove to hush it, mechanically, but seeming scarcely to sympathize with its trouble. With the same hard demeanour, she was led back to prison, and banished from the public gaze within its iron-clamped portal. It was whispered by those who peered after her, that the scarlet letter threw a lurid gleam along the dark passage-way of the interior.